This presentation is entitled Islam in Senegal, Between Public and Private, From Streets to Cyberspaces. I'm Kae AMO from Kyoto State University. Today, I will talk about the religious revival in Senegal, focusing on young Muslims and their Islamic movements. I will explain how they've become more and more influential in the public sphere. In my thesis, I worked on various Muslim movements and religious sectors in public universities, private Islamic institutes affiliated to local Sufi brotherhoods or to international reformist groups like Wahhabi or Salafi movements. After several years of observation and through my experience as a student at the University of Dakar, between 2003 and 2008, I noticed that hundreds of Muslim actors were joining social and religious activities in universities. Like you see here, students are praying at the entrance, doing their ceremonies, religious ceremony at the entrance of the university. Today, an increasing number of students and young people are devoting themselves to Muslim movements. These young and educated disciples have a significant impact on the national public life. Abdurrahman Sheikh calls this recent religious and political movement and the changing moral and social values a new Senegalese modernity. In this paper, I will argue that this alternative modernity or new modernity can be described as a production of new spaces, new spheres in Senegalese public and private spheres, which reflect specific religious values. As some researchers have pointed out, the different Islamic teachings are constantly being adapted by the local society and combined with other elements such as the culture of the younger generation, liberal thinking, democracy, and so on. To understand this better, I suggest three main themes here. First of all, I will describe the historical background of Muslim movements in Senegal and how they have been dominating the public and private spheres in the country for years. And secondly, I'll discuss the arrival of new types of Muslim actors using ICTs, information and communication technologies, and media to gain more influences. And thirdly, I will take a closer look at the religious education and implication of each individual in these groups. So let's start with a quick historical overview of the Muslim communities in Senegal. Almost 90% of Senegalese are Muslims, the majority of them belonging to Sufi brotherhoods, Tijaniya, Emuridiya, and other smaller groups. So Tijaniya was founded in Morocco in the 1890s by Algerian Ahmad al-Tijani. It first started to expand in the Maghreb before spreading to West Africa, particularly in Senegal, the Gambia, Mauritania, Mali, Guinea, Niger, Chad, and Ghana. Tijaniya established in Senegal during the 19th century against the backdrop of local jihad to fight colonization. And Muridiya is a local brotherhood or tariqa, the Arabic word for path, spiritual training or spiritual path, founded by Sheikh Ahmad Bamba toward the end of the 19th century during the colonial period. While the movement was first adopted by warriors and farmers of various Wolof kingdoms, it seems expanded across the country thanks to the charisma of Sheikh Ahmad Bamba. And one of his first followers, Sheikh Ibrahim Fall here. They created Quranic schools known as daras. You can see some pictures here of daras, which still exist today. To use the Japanese word, we could compare these Islamic schools as dojo, where disciples receive religious training while cultivating groundnuts. At the head of the schools are the marabouts, who guide their disciples through the spiritual path. French colonial authorities quickly understood it was in their interest to collaborate with this powerful religious group, which was developing a huge groundnut production. Years later, the newly independent Senegalese government sought the same thing. So that's the reason why the Muridia is often referred to as the state within the state, given its political and social influence. In 1970s, after severe droughts hit Senegalese rural areas, Dares members started to settle in urban areas. Thousands of Mari disciples became merchants working in Dakar and other big cities, but also in neighboring countries. These newly formed urban communities are known as daira. And throughout the years, the Maurid and Tijani communities have gained so much power that we may consider them as religious corporations. There are many dairas now in universities in Senegal, across the country. As you can see in these pictures, we cannot talk about Senegalese streets and public spheres without talking about Sufi brotherhoods. In every single street or every bus, we can see signs of marabouts, be they pictures, drawings, or quotes. And the university where I conducted my research, students are involved in dairas, as you see here in these previous pictures. So students are involved in these activities and organize religious movements and activities here. So yeah, you can see some pictures even the buses. So now I move on to my second topic, media, ICTs, and Muslim communities. It is quite common for Senegalese religious groups to develop and use their own media and information networks. Their goal is to spread their religious education while gaining political and social influence. I will present two cases here. First of all, Dairatul Mustashidin, or Mustashidati, a branch of Tijaniya community, and secondly, the case of some Murid groups. So Dairatul Mustashidin, or Mustashidati, was founded by the Tijani Marabu Sheikh Tijan Si, father of the actual leader, Mustafa Si. In many ways, as Alexander Thorson mentions, the movement represents a continuation of intrafamilial struggles and political activism begun by the Sheikh Tijansi in the late 1950s. The movement puts the emphasis on reformist themes such as Islamizing society from below and other Arabic language education. This group is categorized by certain French researchers as neo-confrérique or neo-brotherhoods. And these neo-brotherhoods have been largely developed in the 1980s and 1990s in the context of political and economic crisis and liberalization. Influenced by the youth movement in Dakar, in some big cities in Senegal, they recruit students and young people who were frustrated by the government at that time. I worked through some of these political and Islamic movements created within Sufi brotherhoods. Like you see some pictures of them, Cheikh Bejochun, leader of the movement called Chantakun, universal movement for the unity of God, led by Modo Korambake. According to Master's thesis written by one of the Mustarshid reader of youth, Mekhalim Bai, which was my colleague at University of Dakar, the movement regards Islam as a totally way of life and seeks to offer you a return to Islamic values. Its education, cultural, and political and economic programs are designed to adapt modern life to the prescription of the Muslim religion. They attach great importance to education of the youth, women, and children. For this purpose, they launched their own TV channel to broadcast their program series and the religious conferences they have organized since the foundation of the group. So you can see here some examples of use of technologies by Muslim groups, TV channels, radios, online conferences, websites, and blogs, and social networks are also used. So I can give here the example of University of Ramadan organized by Mustashidin. This conference series is organized every year during Ramadan by the Dairatul Mustashidin, who invites famous university professors and other religious authorities. They have simultaneous translations in French, English, and Arabic. They also have their own camera crew and technicians. So you can see some people here. The conference is broadcast live across the country via the internet. Disciples watch the program in different areas of Dakar, in other regions, and even abroad, from Africa, France, Italy, Turkey, and the United States. All disciples affiliated with this group get together in front of a screen between 9 p.m. and midnight in the local site of the Daira to watch the conference. Facebook, cell phones, and blogs have become major communication tools for followers trying to maintain ties with their Marabout. So you can see the building. And they invite also famous university professors like Sulaiman Bashir Jai from Columbia University. They have their own website, Facebook. And I can give some other examples like in Murid community, the work of Sheikh Kae shows how Touba, the same city of Muridia, is connected to the internet and built on media networks. For example, Touba FM, located in the Jurbel region, was launched in March 2003 in order to cover the news in the city, which was experienced in parallel growth both in terms of business and population. It was also grown in prominence as a religious base because it was become the stronghold of the Murid. Touba TV, launched in 2009, is also interested in religious activities as well as spreading the Murid ideology. I can give here the example. Dairatul Hizb Tahir is a community of ancient Murid students of the University of Dakar, now working in several regions and even abroad. Hizb Tahir often referred to as the brain of the Muridia, and it was the first movement to use computer technology to promote their religious education and activities. Sheikh Kae has mentioned that they have developed an information system that controls personal information of all disciples registered in their own database. And this technology enables them to keep contact with former members of Daira and develop commercial, educational, or political networks. I can show some the contents of these Muslim medias. So Islamic education is the most important contents of their program, but also they have some news programs, music and entertainment, and or some news from the community. So referring to these examples, I would like to raise some points and analyze the features of these new Islamic movements and the impact of ICTs. On the one hand, these neo groups focus on the image of authentic Islam, so like Quran, Sunnah, or story of the Prophet. And on the other hand, they tend to show their own image of universal Islam, promoting their own Marabout as the best and last promised leader. Some leaders are fluent in Arabic and French. These leaders use Western codes like clothing and language to attract a wider audience. I will now focus here on their messages. They criticize the westernization of the society and changing social values. They try to re-Islamize the Sikh Senegalese society, in their words, and their purpose is to promote Islamic moral and educational values. The ICTs are used for this purpose. I summarize here my interviews to sketch out why they consider their society to be Sikh, because of materialism and individualism, which deepens the social gap between rich and poor, because of bad governance and corrupted government, because of social and economic crisis, because of poor educational system and the loss of moral and religious values. This sickness has several manifestations: disrespectful manners of young people towards their parents and elders, wives who insult their husbands, young girls underdressed, aggression, violence, thefts, rapes, homosexuality and prostitution, and adultery that they consider as a main cause of teenage pregnancy and abortion, drugs and alcohol, those who illegally migrate out of the country. So these are the things that they are critical in their discourses. People I have talked with consider Muslim associations as the gatekeepers to preserve their religious and cultural ideologies. One student insisted upon the following phrase: the only solution to this social crisis is education, education, and education. I can mention that education involves can be described by different expressions. For example, yar means education in order to have a correct behavior, respect for the others and superiors. Digin is to have referential moral and religious values that guide individuals in daily life. And Sakhamkham is a search for knowledge, and that knowledge is essentially religious and spiritual. We can say that in Daira or Muslim associations, disciples try to deepen these religious educations through the guidance of the Marabu. So I can say that the last characteristic of these youth is that they navigate between spiritual and temporal. One of the leader of the youth in the Starshidin group said that the temporality and the spirituality should go together because we are on earth, develop this earth not to be retired from the society. On the contrary, we should be involved in the society, armed with Islamic values to transform this society as what would Prophet hope to see. One of the most interesting features of this new generation of Muslim youth is the combination of spiritualism and secularized modern lifestyle. I can call this dynamic the detachment and attachment to earthly life that push many disciples to devote themselves to social causes and to citizen activism. The good deeds are not an obligation, but necessary to reach the happiness on earth and be hereafter. I quote from a Tijani student here. He said, "Life doesn't finish here. You should prepare your death and hereafter. Because on the judgment day, no one but you can help yourself. The difference between a believer and an ignorant is that believer knows that the purpose of life is the hereafter. That does not mean that we should abandon our lives. I can be rich and have a lot of success in my life, but I know that I can't bring my money into my grave. Success and wealth are only valuable when you have the intention to help others, because the only thing that you can keep after your death is your good deeds." So this search for good deeds and the effort to fight with oneself or with one's or nafs in Wolof or in Arabic is interpreted by the word greater jihad by these followers. So I note here some main characteristics of the new type of Muslim activists. First, modernized lifestyle, technical knowledge, and new communication skills, combination of orthodoxy of Islam and spirituality, religious rationalism and autonomous political involvement, multilingualism, transnationalism, and multicultural references. So I can say that today the new types of Islamic movements that I have mentioned have proved their capacity of self-governance supported by their own think tanks, media and transnational academic and financial networks, but also and finally by their disciples. As Alfred Nisunjari mentions, the process of religious revival is considered here as a demand of redefinition and renegotiation of a modernization process in Senegal. That also explains Abdurrahman Seikh's term, New Senegalese Modernity. Finally, through my observations and research, I think that we should be very careful about concepts and categories that we researchers are using to define Muslims or religious groups. We are now facing a scene where religious actors themselves play several roles, define themselves in various ways, and diffuse their images, informations as they want to. In other words, they choose what they want to show to the world, carefully building their brand. That is what I'd like to mention by describing this religious revival or new modernity that characterizes today's Senegalese private, public, and digital spheres. Thank you for your attention.